Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. We've talked a lot about incredibly gutsy performances by players on this channel before, where players step up in the face of adversity, play through a painful injury, and overcome the odds to put up great numbers and lead their team to victory. But the same thing can be said about coaches too. Coaches are just like everyone else, and they can get hurt. No, they're not the ones taking shots on the field and having to put their bodies on the line, but they can get injured and have to do their job through excruciating pain, even when it seems incredibly ill-advised. And for most people, when you're dealing with a potentially life-threatening injury that hurts like crazy, your job is the last thing on your mind. But not in this instance, because this is Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Charlie Weis. When most people think of Weis, they don't remember him for his stint in the NFL. They remember him for his rather disastrous run as the head coach at Notre Dame, where he was infamously paid $19 million by the school just to never coach for them again. But what you might not realize is that for all his flaws, he might have had the gutsiest performance by any coach in the history of the Kansas City Chiefs, and in the history of the NFL for that matter. When faced with the option of getting a life-saving surgery or coaching, he decided to coach. And the end result, somehow, was one of the best games of his career. This is the story behind the craziest coaching performance in the over 60-year history of the Chiefs franchise. Before I talk about the performance in question, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, as well as who Charlie Weis is. It's September 26, 2010, and it's week 3 of the NFL season, with the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the San Francisco 49ers. Now, it's early on in the year, so a lot can change, and a lot can happen. But perhaps no team in football at this point is more surprising and making more heads spin than the Chiefs. Kansas City was atrocious in 2009. They finished the season with an abysmal 4-12 record, which was the worst record in the entire AFC. They had an awful defense that allowed 424 points, which was the worst total in the AFC, and came out to an average of 26.5 points per game. They ended the season losing 5 of their final 6 games, and in their final 8 games, turned it over in every single one, turning it over 20 times for an average of 2.5 times per game. You're not going to do anything productive in the NFL with numbers like that. However, through the first 2 weeks of the 2010 season, the Chiefs were 2-0. They defeated the San Diego Chargers on Monday Night Football in Week 1, and followed that up with a comfort-behind 16-14 victory over the Cleveland Browns in Week 2. Again, it was super early, but the Chiefs were the only undefeated team in the AFC West thus far, and they had a golden opportunity in this game against the 49ers to keep their undefeated season going, and extend their lead early on in the division. The 49ers were looking like one of the worst teams in football so far. They were 0-2. They had allowed 56 points, which was the worst total in the league, and their point differential of -28 was the worst in the NFC and the second worst in football, only ahead of the Buffalo Bills at -32. Plus, the Niners were at a disadvantage in every sense of the word. This was a 1 o'clock Eastern game, so that's never good for West Coast teams when they have to play early. This game was a road game requiring the Niners to travel halfway across the country, and this game was on a short week, as the Niners just played the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football the week before. In other words, the Chiefs had a great chance of winning this one, getting to 3-0, and making themselves look like the surprise contenders of the 2010 season early on. And while there were a few reasons for their surprising success to kick off the new decade, one of them was the fact that after a poor 2009 season, head coach Todd Haley decided to make some changes to his coaching staff. In 2009, Haley fired offensive coordinator Chan Gailey just 2 weeks before the season started, and decided that he was going to double dip as both the head coach and the offensive coordinator. This strategy did not work out whatsoever, and Haley realized that. He knew that he was too ambitious and had too much on his plate, and needed to hire an offensive coordinator in 2010 to take the load off. And he had just the guy in mind after Charlie Weis was fired from his post at Notre Dame. Haley and Weis knew each other well. The two men were assistants together for 3 seasons with the New York Jets back in the 90s. Additionally, Weis had a good relationship with Chiefs general manager Scott Pioli, as Pioli was a front office executive with the Patriots when Charlie Weis was the offensive coordinator there, and helped guide the Pats to all of those Super Bowls in the early 2000s. In many ways, this seemed like a logical fit, and everything was going swimmingly through the first 2 weeks of the season. as the Chiefs' heavy emphasis on running the football, which netted them 275 rushing yards over the first 2 weeks, was working well. Their offense, through 2 games, was right smack in the middle of the league in points scored, which was a noticeable improvement over their 23rd ranked, turnover-filled offense in 2009 that had an 8-game stretch where they averaged barely over 15 points per game. However, right as things looked like they were starting to turn around for the Chiefs heading into this game against the 49ers, disaster struck. On the night of Friday, September 24th, not even 48 hours before the Chiefs were set to play in this game, Weis was in excruciating pain. Because as it turned out, he had an infected gallbladder. It was so severe that he needed surgery, and probably needed the surgery immediately. Now I should note that I'm not a doctor, but an infected gallbladder sounds nothing short of painful. In the moment, symptoms include but are not limited to pain across the upper part of your body, nausea, vomiting, and a fever. If left untreated, it can lead to a gallbladder rupture, which can be life-threatening. Nothing about an infected gallbladder is fun, as I'm sure anyone watching this video who's had one can attest to. Weis knew that he needed to get this treated. His health and potentially his life was on the line. With that, he had 2 options. Option 1 was to get the surgery now. The pro to that is obvious. He can feel better, he won't be in pain anymore, and his life won't be in danger and the infection won't get any worse. The con, however, was that if he did this, he would not be able to coach in Sunday's game against the 49ers. Would this have been the end of the world? Probably not. Again, Haley could easily assume offensive coordinator duties for 1 game, like he did throughout 2009. I remember throughout all of this, that Weis is being paid $19 million by Notre Dame to not coach, so it's not like missing this game would impact his financial situation in any way whatsoever. Option 2 was to wait to get the surgery until Monday after the game. The pro to this is that he gets to coach, and he wouldn't have to miss any time whatsoever, because the Chiefs had an early Week 4 bye. So in the worst case scenario, if he needed some extra recovery time, he could get it. The con, however, is that not only is he in pain for the weekend, but he risks having the infection getting worse, and chances a potentially life-threatening complication. Weis needed emergency surgery. It seemed like an obvious choice. Football is just a game. This is your life we're talking about. Plus, if you do coach in this game, good luck coaching while being in pain and being able to focus. Well, as you probably guessed by the title of this video, Weis decided to coach. On this late September day at Arrowhead Stadium, Weis was going to be calling the plays and running the offense, infected gallbladder and all. And the crazy part was that somehow, with that infected gallbladder and a life-threatening injury, he was able to call one heck of a game. Kansas City's offense was better over the first 2 weeks than they were in 2009, although it was not great by any means. During this game, however, they were legitimately great. Everything went Kansas City's way, as they won this game in rather convincing fashion, taking it 31-10 and going 3-0. It took the Chiefs until Thanksgiving to win their 3rd game in 2009, and they didn't even win 3 games in 2008. In 2010, they accomplished that feat before the month of September ended. It was the first time since 2003, during their 13-3 campaign, that they started a season with a 3-0 record through 3 games. And on this day, especially in the second half, the offense came to play, as they fired on all cylinders. Perhaps the most impressive part about this game on the offensive side was just how consistent the Chiefs were throughout the entire game. Excluding their final drive of the game, which came with 2 minutes left in the 4th quarter when they were leading 31-3, and they just ran the ball with the backups to kill clock, the Chiefs had 11 drives throughout the game. On 10 of the 11 drives, they gained more than 20 yards. There was just 1 drive ending in a 3-and-out, and the average length of their drives was an astonishingly high 38.5 yards. Imagine telling someone before the game that wherever you start with a football, by the time the drive ends, you're going to be roughly 40 yards further up the field. That is incredible, and that's what the Chiefs did on this day, as they sliced and diced on San Francisco's porous defense. Matt Castle had a great day at the office, going 16 for 27 with 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 111.7, with all 3 touchdown passes coming in the first 3 quarters of the game. He threw a 31-yard touchdown to Dexter McCluster in the 2nd quarter to open up the scoring and make it a 7-0 game, then threw a 45-yard touchdown to Dwayne Bowe in the 3rd quarter to make it 17-3 on a beautifully designed and executed trick play, and then put the game out of reach late in the fourth quarter with an 18-yard touchdown pass to Tony Moeaki to make it 24-3. He also never got sacked, as he kept a clean jersey throughout the day. There was no point during this game where the Chiefs trailed, as they were in complete control from the onset. They dominated on third down, going 7 for 14 and converting 50% of the time. They dominated on the ground once again, picking up 207 yards on over 5.3 yards per carry, including a 3-yard touchdown run by Thomas Jones in the fourth quarter that made it 31-3. The two-headed monster of Jamal Charles and Thomas Jones was electric once again, with Jones having 95 yards and Charles having 97 yards. And by the time the final whistle sounded, the Chiefs had 457 yards of total offense, which was their highest output of the season by a fairly large margin at that point. It was nothing short of a dominant offensive performance. And the mastermind behind it? The man calling the plays? Charlie Weis, with an infected gallbladder and all. Despite being in terrible pain, he put off the surgery so that he could coach this game. And the first thing Monday morning, he went to the hospital and got the surgery that he so desperately needed. As Weis's agent, Bob Lamonti, said on the whole situation, he's a tough dude. He didn't bother to do anything other than live through 48 hours of pain. He knew he was coaching on Sunday. And fortunately for Weis, everything turned out alright. The decision to put off the surgery until after the game did not impact his health, as he made a full recovery and no further complications arose. He had to be confined to a motorized cart when he eventually returned to the team a few days later for practice, but he said that the surgery was a success, and even joked that it was perfect timing that he got this on the last week of September, right before the team's bye week, so he wouldn't have to miss any time whatsoever. Weis said, "You never want to worry about those things. They just happen. You get healthy, and you move on. The big picture is that everything turned out great." And the Chiefs would continue to build off of the momentum gained from that game, and would have a fantastic 2010 season by their standards. Despite being expected to do absolutely nothing, they went 10-6, winning the AFC West for the first time since 2003, and just the second time since 1998, and they made the playoffs for the first time since 2006. The offense under Weis was in the top half of the league, averaging 22.9 points per game, which was their highest total since the 2005 season. Although Weis would leave the Chiefs at the end of the season to assume the offensive coordinator position at the University of Florida. And even though they had a ton of great offensive games in 2010, from their 42-point outing against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 7 to their 42-point outing against the Seattle Seahawks in Week 12, considering how consistent the Chiefs were on this late September day against the 49ers, their best outing, considering the circumstances, might have been that Week 3 game against San Francisco. And to think that the man leading the charge in that game was doing so in excruciating pain with that infected gallbladder. Yes, when people think of Charlie Weis today, most people think of his disastrous stint with Notre Dame, where he got a huge buyout to stop coaching there, and then his even more disastrous stint with Kansas in the 2010s, where he went 6-22 and got another huge buyout to stop coaching there. But you can't deny this. The man loves coaching. The man is a tough, strong dude. And perhaps no incident shows this more than when he led the Chiefs to arguably their best offensive outing of the season while dealing with an infected gallbladder and chose not to get surgery just so he could coach in this game. I can't say I would have done the same if I was in his shoes, but considering how it turned out, even if the decision looked ridiculous at the time, in hindsight, it looked like Charlie Weis made a wise call. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.